Welcome back to Dark Night Scare. What you're about to hear will make you think twice about every late-night drive through America's mountain highways. These are true horror stories that happen to professional truck drivers with millions of miles of experience navigating the Appalachian corridor. Every detail has been researched, verified, and documented. This channel brings you true horror stories that have been cross-referenced with official documentation. So, grab your headphones, turn down the lights, and get ready, and please subscribe this channel and like this video. Thank you all. Now let's start. The first victim disappeared on an overly rainy Tuesday in October 1998. Thomas Malone, a 38-year-old truck driver from Bakersfield, California, made his routine haul from Los Angeles to Salt Lake City when he stopped at the Cactus Creek Rest area along Highway 91 in southern Utah. A distinctive red Kenworth with custom chrome details, Malone's truck was recorded by the rest area's security camera at 11:37 p.m. Come morning, the truck remained in the same spot, the driver's door slightly ajar, its engine cold. Yet Thomas Malone was nowhere to be found. Inside the cab, investigators discovered Malone's logbook, meticulously filled, his overnight bag packed, and a half-finished cup of coffee. His wallet lay wide open in the passenger seat, with $174 in cash untouched. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, nothing to suggest foul play. It was as if Malone had simply stepped out of his truck and vanished into thin air. What made his disappearance even more perplexing was Malone's reputation for dependability. After 15 years of long-haul driving, he had never missed a delivery deadline. His dispatcher described him as clockwork reliable and pointed out that he always called in if he was even 10 minutes behind schedule. That night, Malone's scheduled check-in call never transpired. The local sheriff's department initiated an extensive search of the area, deploying dogs and local volunteers to comb the rocky terrain surrounding the rest area. Yet, nothing was found. A footprint, a scrap of clothing, not a single clue to Malone's whereabouts. The case might have lingered as an isolated mystery, if not for the developments 6 weeks later. On December 9, 1998, Darlene Wilcox, one of the few female long-haul drivers operating the western routes at that time, pulled into the same Cactus Creek rest area around midnight. Like Malone, the 42-year-old Wilcox was an experienced driver with an impeccable safety record. Unlike Malone, she was known for her exceptionally cautious nature. Friends described her as hyper-vigilant when it came to her own safety on the road. Wilcox routinely called her sister while stopping for the night, providing details about her precise location and intended departure time for the following day. That night, she called at 12:08 a.m., informing her sister she would grab a quick 4 hours of sleep before continuing at dawn. She mentioned noticing only one other vehicle in the rest area, a dark-colored sedan parked at the far end of the lot with its interior light on. By 6:30 a.m., when Wilcox had not called in as promised, her sister contacted the trucking company, which in turn notified the Utah Highway Patrol. By 7:15 a.m., a trooper arrived at Cactus Creek. Just like Malone's truck before it, Wilcox's blue Peterbilt was exactly where she had parked it. Her logbook showed a final entry at 12:15 a.m. Her purse was secured in the locked compartment where she always kept it. The bunk exhibited signs that suggested someone had lain on it, but the blankets weren't disturbed enough to imply she had actually slept there. The most unsettling detail was derived from the rest area's security footage. At 2:17 a.m., the camera captured a figure approaching Wilcox's truck. The grainy black and white video depicted a man of average height donning dark clothing and some kind of hat. He approached her truck with purpose and knocked on the driver's side door. After a moment, the door swung open and there was a brief exchange. Then, inexplicably, Wilcox climbed down from the cab and stepped out of frame with the unidentified visitor. Neither of them returned during the 3-hour recording window. The dark sedan Wilcox had mentioned to her sister was nowhere to be seen by morning, leaving no record of its license plate or make and model beyond Wilcox's vague description. The vanishing of 2 seasoned truckers from the same isolated rest area within a matter of weeks triggered a multi-agency investigation. The FBI collaborated with local law enforcement as they began to treat this situation as a potential serial abduction case. Warnings were broadcast across trucking channels, leading drivers to avoid Cactus Creek for months, with many refusing to stop anywhere along that 60-mile stretch of Highway 91. In March 1999, the case took an unexpected twist when a Nevada Department of Transportation crew clearing debris after a flash flood approximately 30 miles southwest of Cactus Creek stumbled upon a weathered leather wallet wedged between rocks in a dry wash. Inside, they found Thomas Malone's driver's license. This discovery prompted renewed searches, yielding additional evidence, a woman's work boot comparable to those Darlene Wilcox wore, and, chillingly, a notebook listing names of truck drivers, including both Malone and Wilcox. Among the notebook's entries, 3 other names were crossed out. Investigators rushed to identify and locate these individuals. The first 2 names, Jordan Hayes and Miguel Sanchez, were swiftly connected to missing persons reports from 1997, drivers who had disappeared while traveling through the Southwest. Until now, their cases hadn't been linked due to the fact that they vanished from different locations. Hayes from a truck stop in Arizona, and Sanchez from a rest area in New Mexico. The third name, Franklin Weber, was that of a 52-year-old driver not present in any missing persons database. Upon contact, Weber's trucking company revealed unsettling news. He wasn't missing. Weber had survived an attempted abduction at the Cactus Creek rest area in July 1997. He had not reported the incident to police, fearing he would come off as paranoid. According to his late statement, a man had approached him in the middle of the night, claiming to be a stranded motorist. Something about the man made Weber uneasy, prompting him to decline opening the door. The stranger grew increasingly agitated, ultimately threatening to add Weber to his collection before vanishing when another truck pulled in. Weber's description of the man matched the figure seen in the security footage with Darlene Wilcox, average height, wearing dark clothing and a hat. He added a notable detail that the grainy video failed to capture. The man spoke with what Weber identified as an educated accent, employing surprisingly formal language. The investigation ramped up, with law enforcement establishing undercover operations at Cactus Creek and other isolated rest areas along Highway 91. For months, nothing occurred. It was as if the predator had sensed the trap. Then, the most disturbing development of all transpired. In January 2000, a recreational hiker exploring an abandoned mine shaft in the mountains about 15 miles from Cactus Creek made a gruesome discovery: human remains. Forensic analysis would later confirm they belonged to Thomas Malone. The state of the remains told a shocking tale. Malone had not passed away quickly. Evidence suggested he had been kept alive for weeks after his abduction, suffering what the medical examiner tactfully described as systematic trauma. The cause of death ultimately became starvation. As investigators expanded their search to abandoned mines in the area, many dating back to the 1800s, they uncovered a series of crude cells formed from mining chambers. One held personal belongings belonging to Darlene Wilcox, while another contained a trucker's cap, identified as that of Miguel Sanchez. In the deepest chamber, something unnerving sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned investigators. A makeshift trophy room filled with logbooks, keys, and personal effects from all 4 victims. The walls were adorned with photographs, surveillance-style images capturing truckers at various rest stops, most of whom remained unidentified. Some photos depicted the victims prior to their abductions, indicating they had been stalked for an extended period. The most distressing aspect was a detailed journal that documented the abductions and ensuing captivity, written in a clinical, almost academic tone. The author, likely the perpetrator, referred to the victims not by name, but by number, meticulously, detailing their responses to isolation and thresholds for deprivation, as if conducting experiments. Despite the wealth of evidence, the perpetrator's identity lingered in the shadows. The journal revealed no personal identifiers, while the photos were devoid of any images of the photographer. Forensic evidence had deteriorated due to time and the harsh environment. The Highway 91 investigation lagged for nearly 2 additional years until a routine traffic stop in Cedar City, Utah, led to the arrest of Edward Crane, a 45-year-old former psychology professor. In his vehicle, officers uncovered multiple fake IDs, a police scanner, and detailed maps showing remote rest areas throughout the Southwest. A search of Crane's unassuming home unveiled powerful evidence: a concealed room containing photographs resembling those discovered in the mineshaft, a collection of items from victims not yet linked to the case, and journals featuring continued clinical observations akin to those found in the mine. When confronted with the evidence, Crane exhibited neither remorse nor apprehension. "They were perfect subjects," he reportedly stated to the investigators. "Isolated, self-sufficient, accustomed to discomfort. I wanted to see how long they would maintain hope in a hopeless situation." After losing his university position in 1996 due to complaints about his ethically dubious research proposals focusing on isolation and human psychological breaking points, Crane had seemingly resolved to conduct his research outside the boundaries of institutional ethics. His method was straightforward yet effective. He targeted truckers at lonely rest areas, approaching them with plausible tales, an urgent medical situation, a broken-down vehicle, or even posing as a fellow trucker. Once gaining their trust and closing proximity, he would utilize a concealed stun gun to incapacitate them and subsequently transport them to his network of makeshift cells within abandoned mines. In April 2002, Edward Crane was convicted of 4 counts of kidnapping and murder, receiving multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. Authorities suspect the 4 confirmed victims might only represent a fraction of his actual crimes. Many long-haul truckers who vanish are not swiftly reported missing due to the independent nature of their work. Today, a small memorial exists at the Cactus Creek Rest Area to honor Thomas Malone, Darlene Wilcox, Jordan Hayes, Miguel Sanchez, and countless others who vanished along the highway. The incident has prompted heightened security measures at remote rest areas throughout the western United States, with improved lighting, advanced camera systems, and panic buttons. For truckers who continue to navigate Highway 91 through the stark beauty of southern Utah, the memorial serves as a grim reminder of the vulnerabilities linked to their profession. Many still avoid Cactus Creek after dark, referring to it as Dead Man's Curve, a nickname not associated with the road itself, but with the predator who once hunted in its shadows. The Highway 91 abductions fundamentally altered how the trucking industry addresses driver safety, particularly for those driving through remote areas during nighttime hours. Yet perhaps the most disconcerting element of this case is how effortlessly Crane took advantage of the mutual aid culture that exists among long-haul truckers. Their willingness to assist a stranded motorist or fellow driver turned their best instincts into a deadly vulnerability. The chaos when an unnatural fog traps everyone at a bustling Appalachian truck stop. It was a bright Thursday afternoon at the Coal Creek truck stop, nestled within the heart of the Appalachian Mountains near Charleston, West Virginia. The parking lot was alive with activity, every available space occupied by diesel rigs, engines humming as drivers chatted during their midday breaks. Amidst the crowd, Morgan, an accomplished female mechanic, diligently worked in the service bay, her hands grease-stained but steady as she calibrated the air brakes on a massive freightliner. Morgan took great pride in being the best mechanic in the Appalachian corridor. No rig too intricate, no issue too stubborn for her adept hands and sharp intellect. She had earned respect in a male-dominated industry through sheer competence and an unwavering work ethic. Today was no exception, as the radio crackled with an emergency dispatch from Sage, a local tow operator whose formidable knowledge of the treacherous mountain roads was legendary among drivers. "We've got a major breakdown on I-64. Sage's voice sliced through the afternoon chatter, urgency evident even through the static. "Worst part is, The entire area is being hit with a freak fog. Visibility is plummeting to zero faster than I've ever seen. Morgan glanced outside the garage doors, where brilliant afternoon sunlight struggled to penetrate the thickening haze that seemed to creep up the valley walls like living fingers. The sight sent an inexplicable chill through her. Nevertheless, she grabbed her comprehensive toolkit without a moment's hesitation. "I'll meet you at the south entrance. We're going to need every trick in the book for this one." By 2:30 p.m., the fog had completely engulfed the truck stop and all nearby roads, transforming the bright afternoon into an eerie, premature twilight. This wasn't conventional mountain fog. It moved with purpose, swirling and shifting with an intelligence that defied natural explanation. The mist clung to trees and buildings like ghostly hands, rolling in waves that appeared to respond to the fear coursing through trapped drivers. Abruptly, conversations halted as drivers hurried back to their vehicles, some locking doors with shaking hands, others murmuring prayers they hadn't voiced since childhood. The usual sounds of a busy truck stop, air brakes hissing, engines, rumbling, CB radios crackling became muffled and distorted, generating an atmosphere thick with supernatural dread. Morgan and Sage met near the fuel pumps, their eyes straining to see beyond the oppressive greyness that had reduced their world to mere feet of visibility. Together, they navigated the once familiar, now invisible grid of concrete and oil-slicked asphalt, guided only by the faint, ghostly glow of truck headlights and the occasional whispered conversation between stranded drivers. The fog exhibited unnaturally unsettling behavior that chilled them both. Starting a truck engine produced visible ripples in the mist, swirling patterns that moved closer like entreating tendrils. When someone called out from a nearby rig, the fog briefly parted to reveal nothing but empty shadows between towering pines, as though the voice had been devoured by something invisible and hungry. Inside the garage, Morgan's radio equipment crackled with increasingly urgent distress calls, fragmented SOS signals lost in static, with replies originating from sources that should not exist. Suddenly, Sage's heavy-duty tow truck, parked securely beside her workspace, jolted violently as if seized by unseen forces, the diesel engine sputtering without mechanical cause. "This isn't natural," Morgan muttered, her professional instincts screaming warnings her rational mind struggled to accept. Fog doesn't behave like this. It doesn't hunt. They made a strategic decision to barricade themselves inside. The garage using heavy tool chests, service carts, and spare truck parts to block the large roll-up door. As the supernatural fog pressed against the windows, attempting to seep through every crack and crevice, silhouettes flickered within its depths, human-shaped shadows with hollow, hungry eyes, searching for something specific. Communication with the outside world steadily degraded. Cell towers collapsed across the region, and CB channels designated for emergency dispatch became overrun with indecipherable whispers and distorted voices speaking in languages no living person recognized. The fog appeared to thrive on fear and uncertainty, visibly thickening with every moment of terror. Morgan seized her handheld radio equipment, cycling through available frequencies in a desperate quest for clear communication. Each transmission was met with eerie interference, yet through the static emerged a voice that froze her blood. "You cannot run from what you've done. The fog knows your secrets, and it remembers everything." Sage, checking his GPS navigation system in a frenzy, discovered readings that defied geographic reality. Roads leading into blank voids, highways that looped back upon themselves endlessly, and mile markers counting backward toward nowhere. "This isn't just a weather event," he said, his voice tight with controlled panic. "It's alive and it's intelligent." Desperation ignited innovation in Morgan. She scoured the garage for tools that might disrupt or repel the supernatural fog. Welding torches capable of generating intense heat, pneumatic impact drills creating powerful vibrations, anything that could muster enough sensory disruption to push back the creeping threat. Working with mechanical precision, despite her trepidation, she rigged the Freightliner's exhaust system to funnel concentrated heat and engine vibrations outward. Their improvised defense initially showed promise. The fog recoiled from bursts of concentrated heat and sound, establishing temporary safe corridors through the supernatural mist. Seizing the moment, Sage attempted to guide his heavy tow truck through the wavering path toward the main highway and potential escape. However, the fog proved far more cunning than they anticipated. It sealed off their retreat like a living trap, shutting off their only opportunity as distant crashes echoed through the mist. Vehicles skidding off invisible cliffs, others vanishing without a trace. This supernatural entity seemed to prey on individual fears and guilt, revealing fleeting, horrifying visions of lost loved ones and past mistakes, feeding its growing strength with psychological terror. Morgan's heart raced as clarity dawned upon her. Their only hope lay in combating the supernatural fire with mechanical fire. Employing every tool and technique in her and Sage's combined arsenal, she positioned the tow truck's powerful diesel engine to produce sustained vibrations while maintaining the welding torch's heat output, thereby creating a defensive perimeter of intense sensory disruption around their makeshift fortress. In those desperate hours, Sage shared local mountain lore passed down through generations. The fog served as a manifestation of decades of mining pollution and industrial runoff that had tainted the land, transforming the once protective spirit of the mountains into a vengeful tormentor, punishing those deemed responsible for environmental devastation. Time blurred as they battled to uphold their technological sanctuary against the supernatural onslaught. Exhausted but resolute, they gradually noticed the fog beginning to thin as dawn approached, retreating reluctantly as natural sunlight spilled over the eastern ridge. Normal radio communication trickled back, with familiar CB chatter resuming. Throughout the mountain corridor, Morgan and Sage survived that harrowing afternoon, forever scarred by the encounter, yet triumphant through teamwork and technical expertise. Word quickly spread through the trucking community, delivering warnings to fellow drivers and mechanics. Respect the mountains and acknowledge the environmental damage caused by human industry, for some supernatural forces don't rise from hell, but from the wounds inflicted upon our earth. The Coal Creek truck stop reopened fully within weeks, yet the supernatural fog remained a lurking threat in the nearby valleys. Those who confronted it shared their experiences in hushed, reverent tones, often casting nervous glances toward the swirling mists at dusk. Veteran drivers caution newcomers that the fog waits patiently, biding its time, hunting for the next careless soul, dishonoring the mountain's wounded spirit. Morgan keeps her toolkit ready and her environmental awareness sharper than ever. At times, when atmospheric conditions align and the wind shifts through the valley, she can still hear the chilling whisper that cut through the radio. You cannot run. The fog knows your secrets. On August 17, 2018, Teresa Blackwell pulled her 18-wheeler onto Interstate 5 just north of Redding, California. The 39-year-old trucker from Eugene, Oregon, was hauling medical supplies to Sacramento, a route she'd driven dozens of times during her 15-year career. What began as a routine summer haul would soon transform into one of the most harrowing survival stories in modern American trucking history. The summer of 2018 had been particularly brutal for California wildfires. Drought conditions combined with record-breaking temperatures had created a tinderbox throughout much of the state. By mid-August, firefighters were battling 17 active fires, stretching emergency resources to their breaking point. The largest, the Mendocino Complex fire, had already consumed over 350,000 acres, but media attention had largely focused on the more populated areas under threat. Less widely reported was the Cedar Creek fire, which had been smoldering in the mountains west of I-5 near the Oregon-California border. Initially categorized as a moderate threat, burning in remote forest land, it had been assigned limited resources, as firefighters prioritized blazes threatening more densely populated areas. That assessment changed dramatically on the morning of August 17th, when unexpected wind shifts drove the Cedar Creek fire toward the interstate with shocking speed. By noon, the fire had grown from 8,000 acres to over 25,000, outpacing the ability of fire authorities to issue timely warnings to travelers along I-5. Blackwell's truck was one of approximately 60 vehicles, including 7 other commercial trucks, that found themselves caught in a 20-mile stretch of highway that would soon become a corridor of fire. The first indication of trouble came when she noticed an unusual haze developing to the west, dulling the typically crisp summer skyline of the Shasta Trinity National Forest. "Something's not right with that smoke pattern," she commented to another trucker over the CB radio. The response would later prove tragically prophetic. "Winds shifting. If that's coming our way, we're in trouble." By 1:30 p.m., the situation deteriorated rapidly. Blackwell's dashcam, recovered later, captured the alarming transformation of the environment around her truck. In less than 20 minutes, visibility dropped from clear conditions to less than 1.4 miles as smoke engulfed the highway. Embers began raining down on the road, carried by winds that had intensified to nearly 50 mph. At 1:47 p.m., Blackwell's dashcam recorded her slowing the truck as brake lights appeared ahead. Traffic had completely stopped. Through her windshield, she could see California Highway Patrol officers frantically directing vehicles to pull to the shoulders. One officer, barely visible through the thickening smoke, was shouting instructions through a bullhorn. "They're saying the fire jumped the ridge," a panicked voice reported over the CB. "It's coming straight for the highway." The recording captures Blackwell's response, her voice steady despite the escalating danger. "Everyone stay calm. We've got concrete under us and clearing on both sides of the road. If we stay in our vehicles, we should be okay." Her assessment, while logical, failed to account for the extraordinary intensity of the approaching firestorm. By 2:00 p.m., the main front of the Cedar Creek fire reached the highway embankment. Winds gusting over 60 mph pushed the flames upslope with explosive force, creating a phenomenon fire scientists call a flame tsunami. A massive wall of fire moving faster than a person can run. Blackwell's dashcam recorded the moment of impact as the fire front struck the line of stranded vehicles. In seconds, visibility dropped to near zero as superheated smoke enveloped the highway. Through the darkness, flashes of intense orange illuminated trees exploding into flames along both sides of the road. The temperature inside Blackwell's cab, according to her truck's environmental sensors, spiked from 92 degrees to over 120 within minutes. What followed was 45 minutes of sustained terror that survivors would later struggle to describe. With nowhere to go and no way to drive out of the inferno, the stranded travelers could only hunker down in their vehicles and hope the fire front would pass before the intense heat became lethal. For Blackwell, whose training included emergency protocols for various road hazards, the situation demanded immediate action. Her truck's dashcam and the recovered audio from her cab recorder documented her methodical response to the escalating crisis. First, she used her truck's built-in radio to broadcast clear instructions to nearby truckers. "Shut down engines. Fire will consume oxygen and could suffocate engines. Save batteries for emergency measures. Close all vents. Use water to dampen any cloth you can find and cover your face." Then she took inventory of her own resources. 2 gallons of drinking water, an emergency breathing mask from her hazmat kit, and the relative protection of her well-insulated cab. She dampened towels and sealed them around the edges of her doors and windows, creating makeshift filters against the toxic smoke seeping into the cabin. Through gaps in the smoke, Blackwell could see other travelers who were less prepared. A family in a minivan directly ahead of her appeared to be panicking, with children pressed against the windows. Using her truck's horn to get their attention, she held up written instructions on a piece of cardboard. "Stay in vehicle, wet clothes, cover faces." The most harrowing moment, captured clearly on the dashcam, came at approximately 2:23 p.m. A massive Douglas fir, its trunk already compromised by fire, crashed across the highway less than 50 feet ahead of Blackwell's truck. The tree struck a passenger car, crushing its roof. Without hesitation, Blackwell grabbed her emergency kit and left the relative safety of her cab. The external camera on her truck recorded her fighting through intense heat and near zero visibility to reach the damaged vehicle. Finding the driver's side crushed, she circled to the passenger door, which she managed to wrench open after several attempts. From inside, she pulled an unconscious man, later identified as retired schoolteacher Martin Delaney, 68, across the center console and out of the wreckage. Half dragging, half carrying Delaney, Blackwell returned to her truck. The entire rescue took less than 2 minutes, but the external camera shows how the extreme conditions immediately affected her. Her exposed skin reddened visibly from the intense heat, and she stumbled twice from the combined effects of smoke inhalation and poor visibility. Back in her cab with the injured Delaney, Blackwell radioed her situation to any emergency responders who might be monitoring the frequency. "I've got an injured civilian, male, approximately 70, unconscious but breathing. Significant head laceration. Vehicle crushed by fallen tree at mile marker 752. Immediate medical evacuation needed." The response came not from emergency services, but from another trucker 1 mile ahead. "No way in or out right now. Fires across the entire road. We're completely cut off." For the next 30 minutes, Blackwell administered basic first aid to Delaney, monitored his breathing, and continued broadcasting their position, all while the firestorm raged around them. The cab temperature continued to rise, reaching nearly 140 degrees despite all her efforts to insulate against the heat. Dash cam footage shows her regularly pouring small amounts of water over both herself and the still unconscious Delaney to prevent heat stroke. At approximately 3:10 p.m., the main fire front began to pass, having consumed most of the available fuel in the immediate vicinity. Visibility improved slightly, revealing the full extent of the devastation. Trees continued to burn on both sides of the highway, but the massive wall of flame had moved east, leaving behind a smoldering apocalyptic landscape. As conditions marginally improved, Blackwell spotted the flashing lights of emergency vehicles approaching from the south. Firefighters and paramedics who had battled through the aftermath of the firefront to reach the stranded motorists. Her final recorded words before emergency responders reached her truck captured both relief and lingering concern. "They're coming. Hang on, sir. Help is almost here." The full scope of the Cedar Pass fire entrapment, as it came to be known, only became clear in the following days. Of the 60-plus vehicles trapped in the fire corridor, 58 people emerged alive, many suffering from smoke inhalation and heat exposure, but remarkably, with no life-threatening injuries. 3 people died, an elderly couple who had attempted to flee their vehicle on foot, and the driver of a convertible with its top down, who suffered fatal burns before the fire front had even fully reached the highway. Martin Delaney, the man Blackwell had pulled from the crushed car, spent 2 weeks in intensive care with a fractured skull and third-degree burns on his arms. He would later credit Black's quick action with saving his life, telling reporters, "I remember the tree coming down and then nothing until I woke up in the hospital. The doctors told me I had minutes before smoke inhalation would have killed me if I'd stayed in that car." For Teresa Blackwell, the ordeal left both physical and psychological scars. She suffered second-degree burns on her face, neck, and arms from her rescue effort, requiring skin grafts and months of recovery. The psychological impact proved equally challenging. PTSD manifested in recurring nightmares and panic attacks triggered by the smell of smoke or the sound of strong wind. Yet the experience also transformed her into an unexpected advocate for improved emergency protocols on America's highways. In the months following the Cedar Pass incident, she worked with the American Trucking Association to develop new training modules specifically addressing wildfire encounters. Her dash cam footage, which she donated to the National Fire Protection Association, became a cornerstone of educational materials used to train both professional drivers and emergency responders. The Cedar Pass fire entrapment led to significant policy changes for California's transportation and forestry departments. Investigators determined that the rapid advance of the fire toward the highway could have been anticipated hours earlier, but jurisdictional confusion between agencies had delayed both the monitoring of the fire's progression and the issuance of highway closure orders. In response, California implemented a new integrated alert system, linking fire behavior modeling directly to transportation management centers, allowing for earlier highway closures when fire behavior suggests potential risk to travel corridors. The system has since been adopted by 5 other western states prone to wildfires. For the trucking industry, the Cedar Pass incident highlighted both the unique vulnerabilities and crucial capabilities of commercial drivers during natural disasters. Commercial trucks, with their reinforced cabs, elevated visibility, and robust communication systems, proved to be among the safest vehicles during the fire entrapment. In the aftermath, several motor carriers enhanced their trucks' emergency equipment to include fire-specific items like personal air filtration masks and thermal blankets. Teresa Blackwell eventually returned to trucking 9 months after the incident, though she requested routes that kept her away from high fire risk areas. When asked by an interviewer why she chose to go back to the profession despite her traumatic experience, her response was straightforward. "The road is still where I belong, but now I drive with a deeper understanding of what it means to be responsible for not just my cargo, but potentially for the lives of everyone around me on that highway." Today, a small memorial stands at the Cedar Pass viewpoint along Interstate 5, commemorating those who lost their lives and recognizing the extraordinary resilience of those who survived. A bronze plaque bears the names of the 3 who perished, alongside a simple quote attributed to Teresa Blackwell. "In our darkest moments on the highway, we are never truly alone." For truckers who still traverse the I-5 corridor through California's fire-prone regions, the lessons of Cedar Pass have become part of the collective wisdom passed from veteran drivers to newcomers. Chief among them is Blackwell's calm directive during the height of the crisis. "Stay in your vehicle, protect your air, help who you can." The true horror of the Cedar Pass fire entrapment lies not in the death toll, which could have been far higher without the quick thinking of drivers like Blackwell, but in the realization that climate change is creating conditions where such incidents are increasingly likely. Each summer since 2018 has brought new wildfire records to the western United States, and the phenomenon of rapid-moving fires trapping travelers has occurred in various locations from Oregon to Colorado. For American truckers, particularly those whose routes take them through the fire-prone regions of the West, the Cedar Pass incident serves as both a cautionary tale and a testament to the difference that one prepared, level-headed driver can make when natural forces transform familiar highways into corridors of fire. Curtis Hoffman never considered himself a hero. At 47, the veteran trucker from Milwaukee had spent over 2 decades hauling freight across America's Midwest. He'd faced blizzards, ice storms, and the occasional tornado warning with the stoic pragmatism typical of career drivers. Weather was just part of the job, something to be respected, prepared for, and endured. But nothing in his 23 years on the road had prepared him for the events of January 12, 2017, a day that would test not only his survival skills, but his humanity in ways he could never have imagined. The winter of 2016 to 2017 had been relatively mild across the northern plains until mid-January, when a massive Arctic air mass descended from Canada, colliding with moisture-laden air from the Gulf. Meteorologists had tracked the system for days, predicting significant snowfall, but nothing historic. What they failed to anticipate was the extraordinary intensity the storm would develop as it moved across the Dakotas. Hoffman was hauling agricultural equipment parts from Minneapolis to Bismarck, a route he'd driven countless times. He'd checked the forecast before departing. 8 to 12 inches of snow were expected, with temperatures dropping into the single digits. Challenging conditions, but manageable for an experienced winter driver with a well-maintained rig. By 2:30 p.m., as he crossed into North Dakota on Interstate 94, conditions had begun to deteriorate. The snow, which had started as large, lazy flakes, had intensified into a driving sheet of white. Wind gusts buffeted his truck, creating swirling ground blizzards across the highway. Visibility was shrinking by the minute. Hoffman's dash camera, which would later become key evidence, captured his growing concern. "Wind's picking up something fierce," he commented to himself. "Might need to find somewhere to wait this out soon." At 3:17 p.m., Hoffman's radio crackled with an urgent message. The North Dakota Department of Transportation was closing I-94 from the Minnesota border to Bismarck due to rapidly deteriorating conditions. All drivers were advised to exit at the next available opportunity and seek shelter. The nearest exit, with services, was Linwood, approximately 12 miles ahead. Hoffman calculated he could reach it within 15 minutes at reduced speed. What he couldn't know was that he was driving into what meteorologists would later classify as a rare mesoscale snowband, an intense localized weather phenomenon capable of producing snowfall rates exceeding 3 inches per hour, coupled with near hurricane force wind gusts. At 3:26 p.m., Hoffman's visibility dropped to near zero in a matter of seconds. His dashcam shows the world outside transforming from a distinguishable highway to a featureless white void. Using the rumble strips as guidance, he reduced his speed to less than 20 mph, desperately searching for the reflective markers indicating the Linwood exit. Then came the moment that would change everything. Through the swirling snow, Hoffman's dashcam captured a flash of red brake lights directly ahead. He applied his brakes gradually, following protocol for slippery conditions. But as he slowed, the red lights ahead seemed to vanish entirely. Seconds later, they reappeared much closer, and at an angle. A passenger vehicle had spun out and was now sideways across the right lane and shoulder. Hoffman swerved left to avoid collision, skillfully keeping his truck under control on the treacherous surface. As he passed the stranded vehicle, his side camera caught a brief image. A sedan with Michigan plates, hazard lights blinking weakly, nearly buried under drifting snow. Protocol in such situations is clear. Commercial drivers should continue to a safe location, then report stranded vehicles to authorities. Attempting roadside assistance in dangerous conditions creates additional hazards, but as Hoffman reached for his radio to report the stranded car, his attention was drawn to something his side camera had captured, something protocol didn't account for. A child's face had appeared briefly in the sedan's rear window, illuminated by the truck's passing lights. The decision Hoffman made in the next 30 seconds would later be described by the North Dakota Highway Patrol as simultaneously against all professional procedure and the only decent human choice possible. Instead of continuing to the exit, he carefully maneuvered his truck to a stop approximately 200 feet ahead of the stranded vehicle, positioning it as a windbreak with hazard lights and emergency beacons activated. Fighting against wind that meteorological instruments would later measure at 58 mph with a wind chill of -35 degrees. Hoffman made his way back to the sedan. Inside were Rebecca Keller, 34, and her 2 children, Emma, 7, and Jacob, 4, who had been traveling to Fargo when their car spun out nearly 40 minutes earlier. Their situation was dire. The car's fuel was running low, the heater was failing, and snow was rapidly enveloping the vehicle. Keller had called 911, but emergency services were overwhelmed with accidents throughout the region. Help, they'd been told, could be hours away. Hours they might not have as temperatures continued to plummet. I knew immediately they wouldn't survive waiting for rescue, Hoffman later testified. The boy was already showing signs of hypothermia. Confused and sleepy, they needed shelter immediately. Hoffman helped the family to his truck, carrying the young boy through snowdrifts that reached above his knees in places. The 200-foot journey took nearly 15 minutes in the brutal conditions. Once inside the relative safety of his cab, he cranked the heat to maximum and provided them with emergency blankets from his supply kit. But their ordeal was just beginning. By 4 p.m., the storm had escalated from dangerous to potentially lethal. Weather instruments at the nearest monitoring station recorded sustained winds of 62 mph, with gusts approaching 70 mph, officially hurricane force. Snowfall rates exceeded 4 inches per hour, creating drifts that were rapidly burying vehicles across the region. Hoffman attempted to reach emergency services via his CB radio and cell phone, but communications were spotty at best. He managed one brief connection with Highway Patrol, providing his location and the status of his passengers before the signal failed. The response from authorities was not encouraging. All emergency vehicles in the area were currently engaged in other rescues or accidents. Their estimated response time was indeterminate. As darkness fell, the full gravity of their situation became clear. They were effectively trapped on an interstate that had become impassable in both directions. Hoffman's truck, though well stocked with fuel, had approximately 18 to 20 hours of idling capacity before requiring refueling. The temperature outside had dropped to 12 degrees before the monitoring station itself failed due to ice accumulation. The truck's dashcam continued recording through these critical hours, providing a haunting documentation of their ordeal. At 6:18 p.m., it captured Hoffman rationing food and water from his emergency supplies. By 8:40 p.m., young Jacob's condition had improved with warmth and hydration, but the truck had been completely enveloped by snow up to the bottom of the windows. Throughout the night, Hoffman maintained a strict regimen, running the engine for 30 minutes, then shutting it down for 15 to conserve fuel, while constantly monitoring the exhaust pipe to ensure it remained clear of snow to prevent carbon monoxide. Poisoning, a silent killer that claims lives in similar situations almost every winter. Between these critical tasks, he kept the children distracted with stories and simple games. A kindness that Rebecca Keller would later describe as the thing that kept us all from panicking completely. By dawn on January 13th, the storm had finally begun to abate, but their situation remained precarious. Snowdrifts had completely buried the lower half of the truck. The temperature inside the cab had dropped during the night, despite Hoffman's careful fuel management. All four were now wearing multiple layers of clothing, huddled together for warmth during the periods when the engine was off. At 7:42 a.m., Hoffman captured a brief cell signal, enough to send a text message with their exact GPS coordinates to emergency services. The response was sobering. Road clearing operations were underway, but the backlog of stranded vehicles and medical emergencies meant assistance could still be hours away. It was at this point that Hoffman made another critical decision. With fuel running dangerously low and temperatures inside the cab dropping to unsafe levels when the engine was off, he determined they needed to create additional insulation. Using the emergency kit's tools, he and Rebecca spent nearly an hour packing snow against the truck's doors and windows. A counterintuitive move that nevertheless employed the same principle used in igloos, using snow's natural insulating properties to trap heat inside. This improvised measure bought them precious additional hours. By carefully managing the remaining fuel, Hoffman was able to maintain survivable conditions inside the cab until 2:15 p.m. on January 13th, nearly 24 hours after he had first encountered the stranded family. When the distinctive sound of heavy equipment became audible through the howling wind, Hoffman knew help had arrived. A North Dakota Department of Transportation snowplow, accompanied by emergency medical services and highway patrol, finally reached their location at 2:37 p.m. The rescuers were stunned to find all four survivors in relatively good condition, despite their extended exposure to one of the worst winter storms recorded in the region in decades. The official report would later document that 17 people lost their lives during the blizzard of January 12th and 13th, 2017. Most were travelers caught in vehicles without adequate supplies or protection. Rebecca Keller and her children were listed. Among the statistical anomalies, survivors of conditions that, by all normal metrics, should have been fatal. In the aftermath, Hoffman's employer initially issued him a formal reprimand for deviating from safety protocols by stopping to assist the stranded family rather than reporting their location and continuing to safety. The public backlash was immediate and intense. Veterans groups, trucking associations, and ordinary citizens across the Midwest rallied to his defense. Within a week, the company not only rescinded the reprimand, but established the Hoffman Winter Safety Initiative, providing enhanced emergency training and equipment for all their drivers. For Curtis Hoffman, the experience fundamentally changed his approach to life on the road. He began advocating for improved emergency protocols within the trucking industry, particularly regarding the rigid rules that sometimes place procedural compliance above humanitarian response. He also became an outspoken proponent for enhanced winter survival training for all commercial drivers operating in northern regions. The North Dakota legislature, responding to the events of January 2017, passed what became known as the Hoffman Act, providing liability protection for commercial drivers who stopped to render emergency assistance during declared weather emergencies, effectively removing the professional risk of choosing humanity over protocol. Today, a small plaque at the North Dakota Highway Patrol headquarters in Bismarck commemorates the incident, bearing a quote from Hoffman that has become something of a mantra for winter drivers across the northern plains. In the worst conditions, the only resource that matters is each other. For truckers who still traverse Interstate 94 through the winter months, the story of Curtis Hoffman and the Keller family serves as both a warning and an inspiration, a reminder that sometimes the difference between tragedy and survival comes down to one person's willingness to stop when every professional instinct says to keep moving. Rebecca Keller, who now volunteers with winter preparedness programs throughout the Midwest, perhaps summarized it best in her testimony before the state legislature. There are two types of heroes: those who run toward danger and those who simply refuse to drive away from it. Curtis was the second kind, and that made all the difference. This story comes from Marcus Big Bear Jackson, a 22-year veteran long-haul trucker with over 2.88 million miles of documented experience hauling specialized freight across the continental United States. Known throughout the industry for his reliability and attention to cargo security protocols, Marcus operated a 2018 Freightliner Cascadia with a Detroit DD-15 engine and maintained perfect on-time delivery records with multiple transportation brokers. He specialized in hauling high-value electronics and pharmaceutical products that required strict chain of custody documentation and temperature-controlled environments. On the night of July 28, 2023, at approximately 3:33 a.m., Marcus was dispatched to pick up an emergency freight shipment in Virginia's coal country when he encountered cargo that would challenge everything he understood about physics, reality, and the nature of transportation itself. Marcus had been deadheading through southwestern Virginia after completing a delivery of medical equipment to a hospital in Bristol when his dispatcher contacted him via satellite communication with an urgent pickup opportunity. The load originated from a pharmaceutical distribution facility located on a remote industrial road near the town of Wise, Virginia, deep in the Appalachian coal mining region. The shipment manifest indicated 38,500 lbs of temperature-sensitive medical supplies destined for research laboratories in Atlanta, Georgia, with a delivery requirement of less than 18 hours from pickup to final destination. The freight rate was unusually high for the mileage involved, nearly double the standard rate per mile. But Marcus had worked with this particular broker before and assumed the premium was due to the emergency nature and time-sensitive requirements of the pharmaceutical cargo. Marcus arrived at the pickup facility at 4:15 a.m., a modern concrete warehouse complex surrounded by security fencing and equipped with multiple loading docks designed for temperature-controlled freight. The facility appeared legitimate and professional, with proper pharmaceutical distribution licensing displayed at the security checkpoint and uniformed personnel managing the loading operations. A shipping coordinator named David Chen provided Marcus with a complete bill of lading, hazmat documentation, and temperature monitoring instructions for the controlled atmosphere trailer he was pulling. The paperwork indicated that the cargo consisted of experimental medications requiring constant refrigeration at exactly 38 degrees F with real-time temperature monitoring throughout the transit period. The loading process took approximately 45 minutes, with facility personnel using electric forklifts to position 12 identical shipping containers onto Marcus's refrigerated trailer. Each container was sealed with tamper-evident security devices and labeled with pharmaceutical tracking numbers, FDA approval codes, and handling instructions printed in multiple languages. Marcus performed his standard post-loading inspection, verifying that all containers were properly secured with load bars and cargo straps, checking that his reefer unit was maintaining proper temperature, and confirming that all required documentation was complete and properly executed. The gross vehicle weight measured 78,200 lbs on the facility's certified scale, well within legal limits for his truck and trailer combination. Marcus departed the pharmaceutical facility at 5:23 a.m. and began his journey south through Virginia toward Georgia, following Interstate 23 through the mountainous terrain of the Appalachian region. His refrigerated trailer was maintaining perfect temperature control at 38 degrees. His fuel levels were adequate for the 420-mile journey, and his electronic logbook showed sufficient driving hours remaining to complete the delivery within the required time frame. However, approximately 30 miles south of the pickup location, Marcus began noticing unusual characteristics about his cargo that didn't align with his experience hauling pharmaceutical products over the past 2 decades of specialized freight transportation. The first anomaly Marcus observed was related to the cargo's weight distribution and handling characteristics. Despite his trailer scales showing a gross weight of 38,500 lbs of freight, his truck was handling as if the trailer was completely empty. On uphill grades, where he should have been downshifting and experiencing reduced acceleration due to the heavy load, his Detroit engine was pulling effortlessly at highway speeds without any increase in turbo boost pressure or exhaust gas temperatures. When descending mountain grades, his trailer brakes weren't engaging with the resistance patterns he expected from hauling nearly 40,000 lbs of pharmaceutical containers, and his truck was maintaining speeds that suggested virtually no cargo weight whatsoever. The second disturbing characteristic involved sounds emanating from within his sealed, refrigerated trailer. Marcus began hearing what he described as movement patterns that didn't match the cargo manifest. Instead of the typical shifting sounds of secured containers during normal highway travel, he was hearing rhythmic tapping, scratching noises against the trailer walls, and what sounded like muffled vocalizations that couldn't possibly be coming from pharmaceutical supplies. The sounds were most noticeable during periods of highway vibration caused by rough pavement or when navigating sharp curves through mountain passes. Marcus initially attributed the noises to inadequate cargo securement by the loading facility, but the sounds continued to intensify and develop patterns that suggested intentional communication rather than random container movement. At a truck stop near the town of Norton, Virginia, Marcus contacted his dispatcher to report potential cargo, securement issues, and request permission to inspect his load to ensure proper transportation safety. However, when he called the contact number provided on his original dispatch instructions, the phone number was disconnected with no forwarding information available. Marcus then attempted to contact the pharmaceutical distribution facility where he'd picked up the freight, but the phone numbers on his bill of lading led to recordings stating that the numbers were no longer in service. Most concerning was his discovery that the pharmaceutical company listed on his shipping documentation didn't appear in any federal database of licensed medical supply distributors. Marcus decided to conduct a visual inspection of his cargo by opening the rear doors of his refrigerated trailer. However, when he attempted to unlock the trailer doors using the seal numbers provided in his documentation, he discovered that the security seals couldn't be removed using standard procedures. The tamper-evident devices appeared to be fused to the door hardware in ways that defied conventional manufacturing processes. More disturbing was his observation that the trailer's interior temperature gauge was reading 38 Darens as required, but when he placed his hand near the door seals, he could feel warm air escaping from inside the trailer, suggesting that his reefer unit was working to cool something that was generating significant heat production. As Marcus continued his journey through the Virginia mountains, the sounds from within his trailer became increasingly distinct and troubling. He began hearing what sounded like human voices engaged in conversation, speaking in languages he couldn't identify, but with speech patterns that suggested intelligence and purposeful communication. The voices would respond to external stimuli, becoming louder and more agitated when Marcus used his air horn or CB radio, and falling silent when he reduced his speed or drove through tunnels. Most unnervingly, the voices seemed to be aware of his driving patterns and route selections, becoming more active when he approached truck stops or way stations, as if the cargo was somehow conscious of their travel progress and destination. Marcus activated his Jake brake on a steep downgrade near mile marker 75, and while his actual engine's compression brake engaged with its characteristic rumbling exhaust note, the Phantom engine continued running at full power, creating a mechanical contradiction that violated every law of physics he understood after 3 decades of professional driving. At 2:15 a.m., Marcus pulled into a rest area to investigate the cargo shifting issue. But when he examined his load, securement equipment, he found that all cargo straps and load bars remained properly positioned and under correct tension. However, his trailer's weight distribution had clearly changed, with his tandem showing different axle weights than when he departed from the pickup facility. According to his onboard scale system, his cargo had somehow redistributed itself within the sealed trailer in ways that defied the physical constraints of the shipping containers and the trailer's internal dimensions. When Marcus attempted to contact law enforcement to report potential cargo security issues, he discovered that his CB radio, cell phone, and satellite communication system were receiving interference that prevented him from establishing contact with any outside parties. Radio transmissions would begin normally, but would be interrupted by the same unidentified voices he was hearing from within his trailer, speaking over official emergency frequencies and preventing him from completing distress calls. His electronic logging device was also malfunctioning, showing impossible mileage calculations and route information that didn't correspond to his actual travel patterns or geographic location. Most disturbingly, when he would coast down mountain grades with his real engine at idle RPM, he could still hear the second engine maintaining much higher RPMs, as if it was working independently under completely different load conditions. Marcus made the decision to abandon his delivery and seek assistance from law enforcement authorities. He exited Interstate 23 at the town of Pound, Virginia, and drove directly to the Wise County Sheriff's Office to report what he believed was a potential human trafficking situation involving his cargo. However, when deputies accompanied Marcus to examine his trailer, they found that his refrigerated unit was maintaining proper temperature. His cargo appeared properly secured, and his shipping documentation seemed legitimate and complete. Most significantly, the trailer was completely silent, with no evidence of the voices or movement that Marcus had been experiencing throughout his journey. The Wise County Sheriff's deputies requested that Marcus open his trailer for a complete cargo inspection. But when they cut the security seals and opened the rear doors, they discovered that the trailer was completely empty. There were no pharmaceutical containers, no shipping materials, no evidence that any cargo had ever been loaded into the refrigerated compartment. The trailer's interior showed no signs of recent use, with no tie-down marks on the floor, no residue from shipping labels, and no indication that freight had been transported. Marcus's bill of lading, shipping manifest, and all related paperwork had become blank documents with no printing, signatures, or official markings of any kind. The Wise County Sheriff's Office investigation revealed that the pharmaceutical distribution facility where Marcus claimed to have picked up his cargo had been permanently closed since March 2023, with no business operations or personnel present at the location for over 4 months. The facility's former owners confirmed that no freight shipments had originated from that location since their closure, and no pharmaceutical products had been stored or distributed from the warehouse since their business license had expired. Security camera footage from the facility showed no truck activity during the time period when Marcus claimed to have loaded his cargo. Marcus Jackson's incident report has been forwarded to the Virginia State Police and Federal Transportation Authorities as part of an ongoing investigation into fraudulent freight operations in the Appalachian region. His electronic logging device data has been analyzed by DOT investigators who confirmed that his truck had indeed traveled the routes he described, but his trailer's weight sensors showed no cargo loading or unloading events during the time period in question. Marcus continues driving professionally, but now requires physical verification of all cargo and direct contact with shippers before accepting any freight assignments in the Virginia mountain region. This story from Patricia Pat O'Brien, a veteran female trucker with 25 years of experience transporting specialty cargo across the continental United States. Renowned in the industry for her meticulous record-keeping and unwavering compliance with federal hours of service regulations, Patricia operated a 2016 Kenworth T680 powered by a PIR MX-13 engine and maintained impeccable logbook documentation that had never faced scrutiny during DOT inspections over her 2 decades of professional driving. She specialized in hauling oversized industrial equipment, requiring precise route planning and detailed coordination with state permitting authorities. On May 17, 2023, around 12:45 a.m., Patricia was driving on US Route 23 through eastern Kentucky's secluded hollows when she stumbled upon a handwritten entry in her electronic logbook that challenged everything she knew about time, documentation, and the enigmatic forces at play in the Appalachian wilderness. Patricia was transporting a massive industrial generator from a manufacturing plant in Louisville, Kentucky, to a power plant construction site in Virginia, adhering to a carefully mapped route that had gained approval from permit authorities across 3 states. Her load measured 14 feet in width, 16 feet in height, and weighed 127,000 pounds, necessitating escort vehicles, special routing, and travel exclusively during designated nighttime hours to mitigate traffic disruption. The generator was essential infrastructure for rural communities long deprived of reliable electrical service following storm damage, making her delivery critical for reinstating power in hospitals, schools, and emergency services throughout the region. Patricia's electronic logbook system was a state-of-the-art Qualcomm device, automatically recording her driving time, location information, and vehicle status in compliance with federal electronic logging device regulations. This system was tamper-proof with encrypted data transmission and required biometric authentication for any manual entries, ensuring that her hours of service documentation was both accurate and legally compliant. Patricia had never experienced technical difficulties with electronic logging systems throughout her 25-year career and had earned a reputation with DOT enforcement officers for maintaining documentation that surpassed regulatory expectations for accuracy and completeness. As she navigated through the daunting stretch of US Route 23, colloquially dubbed the Devil's Backbone due to its narrow lanes and steep elevation shifts, she made a stop at the Paintsville Way station for a mandatory permit inspection and measurement verification. During the inspection, she accessed her electronic logbook to provide driving time records to the Kentucky DOT officer overseeing the oversized load audit. However, upon opening her logbook application, Patricia was astounded to find a handwritten entry that she had never created, one that should have been impossible to generate with her electronic logging system. This mysterious log entry was dated May 17, 1987, exactly 36 years prior, and documented a trip from Louisville to Virginia along the same route Patricia was currently following. The handwriting was remarkably similar to her own, mirroring the same abbreviations and documentation methods she had cultivated over her career. Even more distressingly, the entry described hauling an identical type of industrial generator to the exact same destination, with load dimensions and weight specifications perfectly aligning with her current cargo manifest and permitting documents. The 1987 logbook entry contained detailed notes regarding road conditions, weather circumstances, and route challenges that would have been impossible to foresee in advance. It warned of a bridge weight restriction on Route 460 that wouldn't be enforced until 1994, mentioned construction delays on Interstate 64 that formed part of a highway enhancement undertaking finished in 1991, and included GPS coordinates for alternative routing utilizing technology that wouldn't become available to commercial drivers until the early 2000s. The precise details contained in the 36-year-old entry suggested insights into future events and technological advancements that simply couldn't have existed in 1987. Patricia reported the technical malfunction with her electronic logging device to her fleet dispatcher, but when Qualcomm technical support remotely accessed her logbook, they confirmed her system was functioning normally without evidence of data corruption or unauthorized access. The suspicious handwritten entry appeared in their database with a legitimate timestamp and digital signatures indicating valid manual entry creation, despite Patricia's logging device having been manufactured in 2019 and the software platform not existing in 1987. Technical assessment of the entry's metadata showed creation timestamps that predated the invention of electronic logging technology by over 3 decades. The Kentucky DOT official responsible for Patricia's permit inspection was able to view the mysterious log entry on his enforcement tablet as well, and affirmed that it seemed legitimate according to his system's verification protocols. Nevertheless, when he cross-referenced the 1987 entry with historical DOT records, he found no permits had been issued for oversized loads matching Patricia's current carry during May 1987, nor had a driver named Patricia O'Brien held a license to operate commercial vehicles in Kentucky at the time. This investigation revealed that Patricia would have only been 8 years old in 1987, rendering it impossible for her to have created the the logbook entry. Perhaps most unsettling was the fact that the 1987 log entry contained specific predictions regarding her current journey that began proving accurate as she continued her route through eastern Kentucky. The entry alerted her to a landslide that would obstruct her planned route near mile marker 47, mentioned that her escort vehicles would encounter communication issues in the Jenny Y State Park area, and foretold that she would face a law enforcement checkpoint close to the Virginia border requiring further permit verification. Moreover, this entry included personal details about Patricia's life that were accurate yet impossible for anyone to have known back in 1987, such as references to her future marriage, her daughter's college graduation, and business choices she had made just months before her current trip. As Patricia followed the route detailed in the mysterious logbook entry, every prediction and warning manifested with eerie accuracy. At mile marker 47, she came across road crews removing debris from a landslide that had taken place approximately 2 hours earlier, compelling her to take the precise alternative route outlined in the 36-year-old documentation. Her escort vehicles did indeed encounter communication disruptions in the mountainous terrain near Jenny Y State Park, requiring her to deploy the backup communication procedures described in the 1987 entry with uncanny precision. The law enforcement checkpoint near the Virginia border appeared at exactly the predicted time, with the Virginia State Police conducting thorough inspections of oversized loads based on intelligence about permit violations reported earlier that evening. Patricia's 1987 logbook entry had contained specific guidance regarding her documentation presentation and had cautioned her to carry backup copies of permits that the officers would request. This information proved vital for hastening her inspection and avoiding substantial delays that might have threatened her delivery timeline. Most unsettling was Patricia's revelation that the 1987 logbook entry continued to update itself with fresh information throughout her journey. When she checked her electronic logging device after clearing the Virginia checkpoint, she found new handwritten notes had appeared in the 36-year-old entry, offering updated warnings about road conditions, weather shifts, and suggested adjustments needed to correctly complete her delivery. The new notes were penned in the same handwriting style and utilized the same terminology, as though they were being added by the same individual who had created the original 1987 entry. The updating logbook entry increasingly provided personal guidance that extended beyond mere route planning and load transportation. These handwritten notes included advice about business decisions Patricia was contemplating, cautioned her about potential mechanical issues with her truck that had yet to manifest, and provided explicit instructions regarding family members she needed to contact about situations that hadn't occurred but would soon require her immediate attention. This entry seemed to indicate foreknowledge of Patricia's future, which surpassed her current trip and hinted at insight into events not yet transpired. At approximately 4:30 a.m., Patricia arrived at her delivery point at the Virginia Power plant construction site, where the industrial generator was successfully offloaded and positioned as per the customer's requirements. Yet, during the unloading, construction managers noted they had been anticipating her arrival based on scheduling information received from a prior delivery of an identical piece of equipment that had happened at the same site in May 1987. Supervisors presented Patricia with documentation from their project archives, confirming that a generator matching her current cargo had been delivered 36 years prior by a driver whose signature on the delivery receipt bore an uncanny resemblance to Patricia's handwriting. Investigating the construction project records revealed that the power plant had indeed received a generator in May 1987, but the facility had been demolished due to flooding in 1994 and completely rebuilt with different equipment specifications. The generator delivered in 1987 should have been removed during the reconstruction, but construction teams verified that they discovered the original generator still operational and intact when they began their current project. This 36-year-old equipment was generating electricity effectively despite lacking maintenance records and showing no signs of wear from decades of continuous use. Most importantly, the 1987 delivery receipt displayed Patricia's signature and contact information, including her current cell phone number, and the license plate number of the Kenworth T680 she was using. Furthermore, the documentation from 1987 also included her current DOT medical certificate number and commercial driver's license details that would not be issued until 1998, when she first embarked on her trucking career as a 19-year-old rookie driver. Construction staff confirmed that the 1987 delivery document had been consistently stored in their archives since the original generator install and showed no signs of recent alteration or tampering. Patricia O'Brien completed her delivery and quickly notified federal transportation authorities about the inexplicable logbook entry and the historical documentation that appeared to link her present journey to events that took place decades before her birth. Qualcomm engineers analyzed her electronic logging device, revealing that the handwriting entry was integrated into her system's database at the firmware level, making it impossible to delete or alter via standard software methods. The entry seemed to be a fundamental part of her logging device's operational code, as if it had been embedded since the device's initial programming and activation. Federal investigators discovered that similar logbook discrepancies had also been reported by other commercial drivers operating in the Appalachian region. All these cases involved handwritten entries that predicted future events and supplied guidance for navigating transportation hazards, each featuring dates from decades past, yet containing information about modern trips and current technology that should not have existed when the entries were supposedly created. All affected drivers were female owner-operators experienced in oversized load transportation, and all unearthed the entries while traversing the identical section of eastern Kentucky where Patricia first noticed her anomalous 1987 documentation. Patricia O'Brien continues her trucking business, but reports that the 1987 logbook entry remains active in her electronic logging system, continually offering accurate predictions about her trips through the Appalachian region. Federal transportation authorities have classified her incident as part of a continuous investigation into temporal anomalies impacting commercial drivers in mountainous areas where time seems to operate under different rules than conventional. Physics predict. Patricia's current logbook now features entries dating as far back as 1952 and extending to 2087, all written in her own handwriting and all presenting information that proves accurate despite being impossible for her to acquire through conventional means. We embark on a tale involving a refrigerated trailer that whispered secrets no man should ever hear. The emergency dispatch crackled over Augustus's satellite communication system at 3:47 a.m., sounding like a lifeline cast to a drowning individual. After 2 weeks of light freight and dwindling bank accounts, the offer felt too good to be true. A high-priority pharmaceutical shipment from Virginia's coal region to research labs in Atlanta, promising nearly double the standard mileage rate. Having spent 12 years transporting temperature-sensitive cargo, Augustus knew that emergency medical shipments always commanded premium prices. But this job felt off from the moment he accepted it. The pickup spot was a pharmaceutical distribution facility hidden deep in the Appalachian Mountains near Wise, Virginia, accessible only via winding coal mining roads barely accommodating commercial vehicles. Augustus navigated his 2018 Freightliner Cascadia, towing a cutting-edge utility reefer trailer through the serpentine mountain routes with practiced ease. His headlights cleaved through the pre-dawn darkness as he ascended toward the isolated, industrial complex. At precisely 4:15 a.m., Augustus arrived at a surprisingly modern concrete warehouse, surrounded by security fencing and boasting multiple loading docks crafted specifically for temperature-controlled shipments. The facility appeared to be legitimate and operational, complete with proper pharmaceutical distribution licensing displayed at security checkpoints and uniformed personnel overseeing what seemed like routine loading operations. A shipping coordinator named Lola greeted him, presenting a full bill of lading, hazmat documentation, and detailed temperature monitoring instructions for the specialized cargo he would be transporting. Experimental medications, Lola elaborated, reviewing the manifest. With Augustus, they require constant refrigeration at precisely 38 degrees Celsius. We need real-time temperature monitoring throughout transit. Any fluctuation could destroy the entire shipment. The paperwork specified 38,500 pounds of pharmaceutical containers destined for research facilities in Atlanta, with delivery requirements of under 18 hours from pickup to final destination. The loading process appeared completely routine. Facility personnel efficiently utilized electric forklifts to position 12 identical shipping containers onto Augustus's refrigerated trailer, each sealed with sophisticated tamper-evident security devices and marked with pharmaceutical tracking, numbers, FDA approval codes, and handling instructions in multiple languages. Augustus conducted his standard post-loading inspection, ensuring proper cargo securement with load bars and straps, confirming that his reefer unit maintained the correct temperature, and checking that all required documentation was complete and executed properly. However, as Augustus departed the facility at 5:23 a.m., he began to sense peculiarities about his cargo that defied his decade of experience in hauling pharmaceutical products. Despite the trailer scales indicating a gross weight of 38,500 pounds, his truck handled as if it were pulling an empty trailer, especially on steep mountain inclines where he should have been downshifting due to the heavy load. More alarmingly, sounds emitted from within his sealed refrigerated trailer, differing from typical shifting noises of secured containers during highway transit. He could hear rhythmic tapping against the trailer walls along with unmistakably muffled human vocalizations. The sounds grew more pronounced during stretches of highway vibration, developing patterns that suggested intentional communication rather than chaotic container movement. While stopped at a truck stop near Norton, Virginia, Augustus attempted to reach out to his dispatcher regarding potential cargo securement issues, only to find that the original dispatch contact number had been disconnected. When he called the pharmaceutical facility from which he had loaded, the numbers led to recordings stating that the lines were no longer in service. Most troubling, the pharmaceutical company listed on his shipping paperwork didn't appear in any federal database of licensed medical supply distributors. Determined to conduct a visual inspection, Augustus opened his trailer's rear doors, but the security seals refused to budge using standard procedures. The tamper-evident devices seemed fused to the door hardware in ways that defied conventional manufacturing methods. As he drew his hand near the door seals, warm air escaped from inside the trailer despite his reefer unit maintaining a chilly 38 degrees, indicating something inside was generating significant heat. Continuing through Virginia's mountains, the sounds inside his trailer became increasingly distinct and unnerving. He discerned what sounded like human voices engaged in conversation, speaking in languages he could not identify, yet with speech, patterns implying intelligence and purposeful communication. The voices reacted to external stimuli, growing louder when Augustus used his air horn or CB radio, and falling silent when he reduced his speed or drove through tunnels. Most unsettling was the sense that the voices were aware of his driving patterns and route choices, becoming agitated as he approached truck stops or way stations, almost as if the cargo understood its travel progress and final destination. At mile marker 47 on Interstate 23, Augustus experienced impossible cargo behavior that defied the laws of physics. While navigating a sharp curve at 45 mph, he felt a sudden shift in his trailer's weight, opposite to the centrifugal force, indicating that his cargo was moving independently of the truck's motion. The weight shift was so drastic that Augustus had to counter-steer to maintain control, hearing containers sliding across the floor of the trailer despite being secured with heavy-duty restraints. Frustrated by communication interference that hindered his attempts to contact law enforcement, Augustus found that radio transmissions would commence normally only to be disrupted by those same unidentified voices from his trailer, dominating official emergency frequencies and blocking distress calls. His electronic logging device malfunctioned, providing impossible mileage calculations and route information that did not align with his actual travel patterns. At 2:15 a.m., Augustus made the decision to abandon his delivery and seek help from authorities, driving straight to the Wise County Sheriff's Office to report what he believed was a potential human trafficking situation involving his cargo. However, when deputies accompanied Augustus to his trailer for inspection, they discovered that the refrigerated unit maintained the correct temperature, cargo appearing properly secured, and shipping documentation seeming legitimate and complete. Most crucially, when they requested to open his trailer for a thorough inspection, cutting the security seals revealed a completely empty space within. No pharmaceutical containers, no shipping materials, and no evidence that cargo had ever been loaded into the refrigerated compartment. The interior showed no signs of recent activity, no tie-down marks on the floor, no remnants from shipping labels, and no indication that freight had ever been transported. Augustus's bill of lading, shipping manifest, and all associated paperwork had morphed into blank documents, devoid of any printing, signatures, or official markings. Sheriff's inquiries established that the pharmaceutical distribution facility, where Augustus claimed to have loaded cargo, had been permanently closed since March 2024, with no business activity or personnel present for over 4 months. The former owners confirmed that no freight shipments had originated from that site since its closure, and no pharmaceutical products had been stored or distributed since their business license expired. Surveillance footage from the facility showed no truck activity during the period Augustus claimed to have loaded his cargo. Nonetheless, Augustus's electronic logging device data verified that he had traveled the exact routes he described, with his trailer's weight sensors indicating cargo loading and transport throughout the journey, despite the absence of physical evidence. The investigation revealed a trend of similar incidents across the Appalachian region. Multiple professional drivers reported experiencing identical encounters: emergency pharmaceutical loads from closed facilities, cargo that exhibited impossible behavior, and trailers that turned out to be empty following inexplicable journeys. All incidents involved seasoned drivers with spotless safety records and no history of false reporting. Lola, the shipping coordinator Augustus had described in detail, was nowhere to be found in employment records, and surveillance systems showed no activity at the facility during the supposed loading operation. The business card Lola provided had accurate formatting and security features, but led to contact information for companies that had dissolved years earlier. Augustus's incident report has since reached federal transportation and health authorities as part of an ongoing investigation into fraudulent pharmaceutical operations in mountainous areas. His stellar reputation as a reliable professional driver has shielded him from skepticism, but the experience fundamentally altered how he approaches freight acceptance. "I don't know what I was transporting that night," Augustus confides to fellow drivers, "but it wasn't medicine, and it certainly wasn't human. Whatever resides in those containers doesn't adhere to the laws of our world." Now, he demands physical verification of all cargo and insists on direct facility visits before accepting any pharmaceutical assignments in mountain regions. The facility near Wise remains abandoned, its darkened windows reflecting passing headlights, like hollow eyes. Yet late-night truckers, traveling through Virginia's cold country report, seeing lights flickering in the loading docks and hearing the distinct sounds of forklifts moving freight that shouldn't exist, preparing shipments for journeys that traverse the line between reality and something infinitely more perilous. That underscores the power of community in Appalachian trucking. A crisp November dawn broke over the Appalachian Mountains as 63 truckers gathered in the parking lot of the Mountaineer Dispatch Center near Charleston, West Virginia. Coffee steam wafted from dozens of thermoses as weary faces blossomed into smiles of relief and triumph. After 48 hours of the most intensive search effort in the region's trucking history, missing driver Apollo was safely home with his family, and the mystery gripping the entire Appalachian corridor had finally been unraveled. Lawson, the veteran, CB radio host whose emergency broadcasts coordinated the massive search operation, stood on the loading dock addressing the assembled crowd. His voice, shaped by 2 days of uninterrupted radio coordination, carried across the lot with emotional gravity. "Brothers and sisters of the road, this is what we do. When one of our own goes missing, we don't rest until they're found. Apollo is home safe because of each and every person here." The celebration wasn't merely about a successful rescue. It represented something far more profound about the Appalachian trucking community. These individuals were not strangers, simply driving comparable vehicles. They were an extended family, unified by shared roads, common peril, and unbreakable loyalty to those who understood the unique challenges posed by mountain hauling. The breakthrough emerged through a blend of traditional detective work and modern technology. Security footage from a Sheetz gas station near Beckley, West Virginia, revealed critical details regarding Apollo's last known whereabouts. The timestamp indicated 3:47 p.m. Friday, just hours after his final confirmed radio transmission to dispatch. More importantly, the footage captured something peculiar. Apollo's rig departing the fuel island heading north on Route 19 when his manifest clearly indicated a southbound delivery to North Carolina. Enhanced digital analysis unveiled that the familiar company decals on his trailer appeared faded or modified, and the driver's body language suggested confusion or distress. Lawson immediately broadcast this information over the emergency CB network, and the response was immediate. Within 30 minutes, over 50 truckers had repositioned their rigs to initiate systematic grid searches along every conceivable route between Beckley and the Virginia border. The mountain highways buzzed with coordinated convoys, each maintaining radio contact and reporting their findings every 15 minutes. The search pattern was methodical and professional, cultivated through decades of experience in mountain rescue operations. Veterans like Conn and Zuri took charge of sector searches, their intimate knowledge of backroads and abandoned mining routes proving invaluable as hours stretched toward midnight. The search had evolved into a large-scale operation involving multiple agencies and numerous volunteers. The West Virginia State Police had officially designated Apollo as a missing person, activating their highway patrol aircraft and deploying K-9 units skilled in tracking vehicles through challenging terrain. The investigation expanded beyond the trucking community to encompass family members, company officials, and federal transportation authorities. Apollo's wife, Melanie, drove from their home in Morgantown to set up a temporary command post at the dispatch center. Her presence added urgency and an emotional dimension to the search efforts, reminding everyone that this wasn't just about locating a missing truck. It was about reuniting a family, separated by circumstances none could comprehend. Lawson coordinated communications from the dispatch center, transforming his CB radio show into a continuous emergency broadcast. Every 15 minutes, he updated search sectors, weather conditions, and new developments. His calm, professional demeanor kept spirits buoyant among the search teams, while preserving the systematic approach necessary for covering hundreds of square miles of mountainous terrain. The technological resources were impressive: GPS tracking systems, satellite communication networks, and digital mapping software enabling real-time coordination among ground teams and aerial reconnaissance. However, the heart of the operation remained the human element. Experienced drivers who knew these mountains intimately and weren't willing to abandon one of their own. Concern began to intensify when Apollo failed to check in at his scheduled 6:01 p.m. contact time. In the trucking industry, particularly on mountain routes through the Appalachians, missed check-ins are taken with utmost seriousness. The terrain is unforgiving, weather can shift unexpectedly, and mechanical breakdowns in remote areas can swiftly escalate into life-threatening emergencies. Lawson, monitoring regular dispatch communications from his home studio, noticed the escalating concern in the dispatcher's voice as repeated attempts to reach Apollo on CB Channel 19 went unanswered. By 7:30 p.m., when the electronic logging device in Apollo's truck suddenly halted its transmission of GPS coordinates, the situation was officially deemed an emergency. The initial response adhered to established protocols. Lawson activated the emergency broadcast network, alerting every trucker within a 100-mile radius to watch for Apollo's distinctive blue Peterbilt 379 pulling a white refrigerated trailer. The truck's identification numbers, company markings, and last known location were broadcast every 10 minutes across multiple CB channels. What made this situation remarkable was the complete communication blackout. Seasoned mountain drivers usually maintain some sort of contact even during equipment failures. The simultaneous loss of CB radio, cellular connectivity, and GPS tracking suggested either catastrophic mechanical failure or something more disturbing that none dared to articulate. The day began like any other in the Appalachian trucking corridor. Apollo arrived at the Blue Ridge Freight Terminal in high spirits, joking with the loading crew and expressing excitement about completing this delivery in time to spend the weekend at home with his family. His good mood was infectious. Other drivers later remarked on his unusually cheerful demeanor and optimistic outlook for the journey ahead. The freight assignment was routine: temperature-controlled pharmaceuticals from a manufacturing facility in Charleston to a medical distribution center in Charlotte, North Carolina. The route was familiar, the weather forecast looked excellent, and Apollo's equipment was in perfect mechanical condition. His pre-trip inspection revealed no defects, and his electronic logging device confirmed full compliance with federal hours of service regulations. His final transmission to the dispatch center was upbeat and normal. "This is Apollo, loaded, and rolling south on DA7. Weather's perfect, traffic's light, and I'll keep you folks updated at the 6-1 check-in. Excited for a quiet weekend at home. See you Monday morning." The timestamp on that transmission was 2:47 p.m. and would remain the last verified contact for 45 hours. Working backwards through the timeline, the investigation uncovered a complex sequence of events that initially felt implausible. Apollo had indeed faced a medical emergency, not life-threatening, but serious enough to induce temporary confusion and memory loss. A mild concussion from a minor fender bender had left him disoriented, unable to recall his route or contact information. Good Samaritans had assisted him in reaching a small clinic in a remote mountain community where cell service was non-existent and CB radio coverage sporadic. The medical staff, adhering to proper protocols, had kept him under observation while trying to contact his family. Meanwhile, his truck sat securely in the clinic's parking lot, its electronic systems powered, down and GPS transmitter offline. The altered decals captured by security cameras were, in fact, legitimate. His company had updated their logo design recently, and Apollo's trailer bore the new markings that were unfamiliar to other drivers. His confused behavior at the gas station stemmed from mild concussion symptoms rather than anything more insidious. When Apollo finally regained clear memory on Sunday morning, his first call was to his worried wife, followed closely by a radio transmission to Lawson's emergency network. The relief evident in his voice as he explained the situation brought tears to the eyes of hardened truckers who had endured 2 sleepless days scouring mountain highways for any trace of their missing colleague. The tale of Apollo's disappearance and recovery became legendary throughout the Appalachian trucking community, not due to supernatural occurrences or unexplained phenomena, but because it showcased the unbreakable bonds connecting drivers across hundreds of miles of mountain routes. When one of their own faced trouble, the entire community responded with dedication, resources, and tireless effort until the crisis was resolved. Lawson recounts this story during his regular CB radio shows, reminding listeners that the true magic of the Appalachian trucking community isn't found in ghost tales or supernatural encounters, but in the everyday heroism of ordinary people who refuse to abandon one another in times of trouble. In a world that often feels disconnected and impersonal, the Brotherhood of the Road remains a potent reminder that some bonds transcend geography, weather, and time itself. And that concludes our exploration of Appalachian trucking tales. Whether it's Apollo's community rescue or Morgan and Sage's supernatural fog experience, these mountains conceal many secrets. If these stories resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more mysterious tales. Share your strangest trucking experience in the comments. We enjoy reading your stories. Until next time, stay safe and keep rolling. Safe travels, drivers. On the evening of March 12, 2005, seasoned trucker Ray Simmons maneuvered his 18-wheeler into the Blue Mountain Truck Plaza off Route 219 in rural Pennsylvania. After spending 14 hours on the road, the 47-year-old driver looked forward to a hot meal and a few hours of rest before embarking on his next haul of machine parts to Buffalo. What Ray didn't realize was that he was being watched, having been observed for the past 100 miles by someone who had singled him out for reasons that would only be uncovered in the aftermath of subsequent events. The Blue Mountain Plaza was unremarkable: a fuel station, a greasy diner, and a small shower facility serving the steady stream of long-haul drivers traversing the Appalachian corridor. Ray's routine that night was the same as it had been for 23 years on the road: fuel up, grab dinner, check in with dispatch, sleep. At 9:42 p.m., surveillance footage recorded Ray leaving the diner with a styrofoam container of leftover meatloaf. He returned to his truck, a white Freightliner with faded blue lettering, parked at the far end of the lot, where the big rigs were lined up in parallel rows. The camera lost sight of him as he walked between two trucks. From that moment, Ray Simmons was never seen alive again. The initial sign that something was amiss surfaced the next morning when Ray failed to check in with his dispatcher. Catherine Morris had worked with Ray for more than a decade and described him as excessively punctual. When his GPS tracker revealed that his truck hadn't budged from the Blue Mountain Plaza for over 12 hours, she realized something was off. Local police conducted a preliminary search of the area, finding Ray's truck locked, his logbook open, on the dash with his last entry indicating his arrival time. His overnight bag remained in the sleeper compartment, but the driver was absent. Most concerning was that his dinner leftovers sat untouched on the passenger seat, indicating that whatever had happened occurred prior to his entering the truck. What initially appeared to be a potential medical emergency or a runaway case darkened quickly 3 days later. A Pennsylvania Department of Transportation worker picking up trash along Route 219, approximately 7 miles north of the truck plaza, discovered Ray's wallet in a ditch. The cash and credit cards were still intact, but there was something added: a Polaroid photograph showing Ray, evidently unconscious, with his hands bound by what appeared to be zip ties. The FBI joined the investigation, bringing in a specialized team to handle crimes against transportation workers. As they reviewed the security footage from the truck plaza, agents noticed something that the local investigators had overlooked: a dark SUV that had entered the plaza shortly after Ray's arrival. The vehicle circled the lot twice before parking at the edge of the camera's view. No one exited the SUV on camera, and it left roughly 40 minutes after Ray was last seen. The investigation may have stalled there had it not been for what unfolded 13 days after Ray's disappearance. Trucker Ella Corbett, 39, pulled into the same Blue Mountain Plaza around 10:30 p.m. Like Ray, she was a seasoned driver with an impeccable safety history. Unlike Ray, Corbett had developed a habit of photographing her truck at every stop, an approach she had adopted following a minor hit-and-run incident years prior. That night, while snapping her usual pictures, Corbett noticed something unusual. Although she initially thought it was an animal, perhaps a stray dog, she soon realized it was a person crawling on their belly between the wheels of the trailer park next to hers. Corbett quickly retreated to her truck, locked the doors, and called 911. By the time police arrived 17 minutes later, the lurker had vanished. However, Corbett's photographs provided the first clear image of the suspect: a man in his 30s or 40s, dressed in dark clothing and appearing to wear tactical gloves. Most unsettling was the object clearly visible in his hand: a telescoping rod, resembling a wire loop at the end, similar to animal control catch poles used to capture aggressive dogs. Authorities issued an alert to all truck stops within a 100-mile radius. For several weeks, patrol cars maintained a visible presence at the Blue Mountain Plaza and other facilities along Route 219. The FBI released a composite sketch based on Corbett's photos, generating many tips but no significant leads. Then, in early May 2005, nearly 2 months after Ray Simmons disappeared, a breakthrough emerged from an unexpected situation. State police responded to a single vehicle accident on a rural road about 30 miles from the Blue Mountain Plaza. The driver, identified as Howard Keegan, 42, had lost control on a curve and crashed into a tree. When officers searched the vehicle, they discovered a disturbing collection of items: zip ties identical to those seen in Ray's Polaroid, a telescoping catch pole, several syringes containing traces of a strong sedative, and most damning of all, Ray Simmons's company ID badge. Inside a locked toolbox in the trunk, investigators found more Polaroids. Dozens, showing not only Ray, but also 5 other men, all appearing unconscious or semi-conscious in similar positions. One of the photographs revealed a partial interior, later identified by forensic experts as a specific type of utility van. A search of property records led police to an abandoned dairy farm owned by Keegan's deceased uncle. In a converted milk house with reinforced doors and blacked-out windows, they uncovered the horrifying truth about what had transpired with Ray Simmons and presumably the other men in the photos. The concrete-floored room contained a metal-framed bed bolted to the floor with restraint points at each corner. A drain had been installed in the center of the room. Forensic teams collected hair and blood samples from multiple individuals, including Ray's. On a workbench, investigators found notebooks filled with detailed surveillance notes on numerous truckers, including their schedules and routes. Howard Keegan survived the crash, but suffered significant head trauma. When he regained consciousness in the hospital while under police supervision, he remained unable or unwilling to speak. Neurologists confirmed damage to areas of his brain related to speech and memory. Whether unwilling or feigning ignorance, Keegan's silence meant many queries regarding his crimes would remain unanswered. However, the evidence pieced together painted a portrait of a methodical predator who had devised a system for hunting long-haul truckers. Keegan would identify potential victims at truck stops, tracking them to ascertain their habits before lying in wait. Employing the catchpole, an implement that allowed him to maintain distance, he would administer incapacitating injections of sedatives before transferring his unconscious targets to his van. The most chilling revelation emerged when investigators gained access to Keegan's home computer. For years, he had frequented online forums focused on true crime and serial killers, particularly those targeting travelers and highway users. Within private messages, he expressed admiration for the methods of other perpetrators while critiquing their errors leading to capture. Keegan had intermittently worked as a long-haul trucker himself between 1998 and 2003, but lost his commercial license following a series of safety violations. Records indicated he had briefly been employed at the Blue Mountain Plaza as an overnight janitor but had been fired for erratic behavior. This history afforded him intimate knowledge of trucker routines and the relative isolation of certain sections of large truck stops, especially at night. As the investigation broadened, law enforcement linked Keegan to at least 3 other truck driver disappearances across Pennsylvania and neighboring states. In each instance, a similar pattern emerged. Experienced drivers went missing from truck stops, their personal belongings left behind. The fate of Ray Simmons became clear when cadaver dogs led searchers to a remote section of the dairy farm's property. There, in an area dense with pines, they uncovered human remains buried in shallow graves. DNA testing later confirmed the presence of Ray, as well as 4 other victims. The Keegan case sent shockwaves through the trucking community, highlighting vulnerabilities that long-standing drivers had feared yet rarely discussed openly. Consequently, truck stops across the country implemented new security protocols, enhancing lighting and camera coverage focused on truck parking areas and, in certain locations, initiating regular security patrols. For many long-haul truckers, the case confirmed their most profound apprehensions regarding the lurking dangers present in the blind spots of America's highways. The solitude cherished by drivers became a menacing isolation that could render them targets. Female truckers like Ella Corbett, whose composure and photographic habit contributed to breaking the case, reported feeling particularly vulnerable. In response, trucking companies created new protocols, including obligatory check-ins and panic buttons in newer trucks. Many drivers began traveling in loose convoys, maintaining radio contact even during breaks. The buddy system, once primarily utilized by newcomers, became standard practice for seasoned drivers as well. Howard Keegan never stood trial for his actions. In October 2006, while awaiting competency assessment at a secure medical facility, he used a sharpened plastic utensil to open an artery in his arm, leaving no suicide note behind and taking the twisted motivations that drove him to his demise with him. Ray Simmons's Memorial Fund was established by his former employer to enhance safety conditions for long-haul drivers. Every year, on the anniversary of his vanishing, truckers passing the Blue Mountain Plaza sound their horns in a solemn tribute that resonates across the Appalachian foothills. Today, a simple stone marker resides in the truckers' lounge at the Ray Plaza, bearing the names of confirmed victims along with a quote chosen by Ray's widow. "The road is long, but they are not forgotten." For veteran drivers still traversing Route 219 through Pennsylvania's rolling countryside, the Blue Mountain Plaza remains a grim reminder of the vulnerabilities accompanying life on the road. Many still avoid parking in the far section of the lot, referring to it as the blind spot, a designation that has nothing to do with visibility in mirrors and everything to do with the predator who once hunted there, carefully selecting his victims from the shadows between parked trucks. The Route 219 stalkers case fundamentally changed how the trucking industry approaches driver safety, especially during overnight rest periods. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect is not just how effectively Keegan exploited the culture among truckers, utilizing their necessary routines and isolation against them, but also how he turned critical rest stops into predatory hunting grounds. Law enforcement agencies now often include truck stops in standard patrol routes, and FBI training incorporates modules specifically addressing crimes targeting transportation workers. Meanwhile, for those who traverse the long and lonely stretches of America's highways, Howard Keegan's legacy stands as a constant reminder that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't lie in the road ahead, but rather in what or who lurks in the blind spot. Nathan Reed had been driving the treacherous curves of Colorado's Independence Pass for nearly 15 years. At 49, the veteran trucker knew every switchback, every gradient, and every potential hazard along the narrow mountain route connecting the mining operations of the Western Slope with distribution centers in Denver. What he couldn't have known on the morning of June 7, 2018, was that his intimate knowledge of this perilous road would be tested like never before, and would ultimately save not only his life, but the lives of dozens of unsuspecting travelers. The day began routinely enough. Reed departed from the Silverton Mining Supply Depot at 5:15 a.m. His 18-wheeler was loaded with industrial equipment bound for Denver. The early departure was strategic, allowing him to navigate the most dangerous sections of Independence Pass before tourist traffic picked up in the late morning. The weather forecast was ideal: clear skies, light winds, and temperatures in the mid-60s, perfect conditions for the challenging drive. By 7:30 a.m., Reed had reached the western approach to the pass. As he began the series of sharp switchbacks leading up to the 12,095 FT summit, he noticed something unusual through his windshield. A commercial pickup truck was parked at a maintenance pullout just ahead, its hazard lights flashing. Two men in what appeared to be Colorado Department of Transportation uniforms were placing traffic cones around a small section of the guardrail. Nothing particularly alarming. Routine maintenance was common during the summer months. Reed slowed his rig, giving the workers a wide berth as he passed. Something about the scene nagged at his subconscious. However, he couldn't place it immediately, but something felt off. 10 minutes later, as he navigated a particularly sharp curve known locally as Widow's Turn, it hit him. The pickup lacked the standard CDOT markings and identification numbers required for all official vehicles. It was such a small detail that most drivers would never have noticed. But Reed, who encountered legitimate CDOT crews regularly on his route, had developed an eye for these specifics. He reached for his CB radio, intending to contact State Patrol Dispatch to verify if maintenance was scheduled. Before he could make the call, his truck's engine warning light flashed on, accompanied by a sudden loss of power. This immediate mechanical failure, occurring just minutes after passing the suspicious maintenance crew, elevated his concern to alarm. Reed carefully maneuvered the struggling truck into a scenic overlook pullout, applied the emergency brakes, and popped the hood to investigate. What he discovered sent a chill through him despite the warm morning sun. The main fuel line had been cleanly cut and then loosely reattached. A sabotage designed to allow the truck to run normally for several minutes before the pressure caused the compromised connection to fail. Had this happened just 2 minutes later, he would have been navigating Shepherd's Cliff, a section with no shoulder and a 1,500 FT drop. Reed's dashcam, installed after a near miss with a tourist 3 years earlier, had been recording continuously. He quickly reviewed the footage. From his stop at the maintenance pullout, the camera had captured clear images of both men, though their faces were partially obscured by caps and sunglasses. More importantly, it had recorded the license plate of their pickup. When Reed attempted to call State Patrol on his cell phone, he discovered there was no signal, which was not unusual in the remote mountain pass. His truck's satellite communication system, however, was still functional. He sent an emergency alert to his dispatcher with his location and a brief description of the situation. The response came almost immediately. No scheduled CDOT maintenance on Independence Pass today. State Patrol notified, "Stay put. Do not approach anyone who stops." Reed had just acknowledged the message when he noticed a sedan slow as it passed his truck. The driver, a man in his 30s wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, seemed to be studying the disabled rig with unusual interest. The vehicle continued around the next bend, but Reed's instincts told him the encounter wasn't over. He was right. 5 minutes later, the same sedan reappeared, this time from the opposite direction, having apparently turned around. It pulled into the overlook about 50 FT from Reed's truck. 2 men emerged, the same individuals Reed had seen setting up maintenance cones earlier. Neither was wearing CDOT uniforms now. Reed locked himself in the cab and positioned himself to record with his phone. Through his side mirror, he observed the men approaching, trying to appear casual, as if offering assistance to a stranded trucker. One carried what looked like a tire iron, partially concealed against his leg. "Hey buddy, need some help?" the taller man called out, his voice friendly, but his posture tense. "Looks like you're having engine trouble." Reed didn't respond. Instead, he activated his truck's external air horn, an ear-splitting blast that echoed across the mountainside. Both men flinched, momentarily startled. When Reed immediately followed with a second blast, they exchanged glances, clearly recognizing that their target was aware of the danger. What happened next would later be described in court documents as a coordinated criminal effort that came dangerously close to succeeding. Rather than retreating, the men split up, one circling toward the passenger side of the truck, while the other maintained his position, now openly brandishing the tire iron. "Open the door, trucker!" the man called out, all pretense of assistance gone from his voice. "We just want the shipment. Cooperate, and you'll walk away." What the would-be hijackers couldn't know was that Reed had participated in secure transport training during his military service decades earlier. He understood that his high ground position in the elevated cab gave him a tactical advantage. He also knew his satellite communication had already alerted authorities. Help was coming. But in the remote pass, it could be 30 minutes or more before it arrived. Reed decided to create a standoff scenario, periodically sounding the air horn, both to maintain the men's anxiety level and potentially alert any passing motorists to trouble. The strategy worked initially, keeping the hijackers at a cautious distance as they attempted to determine their next move. The situation escalated when the taller man produced what appeared to be a handgun from his waistband. Through the closed windows, Reed heard him shout, "Last chance, open the door or we're breaking in." Reed had one last defensive option, one that required perfect timing and carried its own risks. Modern semi-trucks are equipped with pneumatic systems controlling various functions, including the emergency brake release via specific controls in sequence. He could create a sudden, powerful release of compressed air from the undercarriage, a blast strong enough to disorient anyone standing nearby. As the armed man approached the driver's side door, Reed executed the sequence. The resulting explosion of air, accompanied by the mechanical grinding of the brake system, erupted directly beneath the would-be hijacker. The man stumbled backward, momentarily disoriented, dropping the weapon as he fought to maintain his balance. In that crucial moment, fate intervened in the form of a Colorado State Patrol vehicle, rounding the curve into the overlook. The officer, responding to an unrelated call further up the pass, hadn't yet received the alert about Reed's situation. But the scene before him, two men in civilian clothes confronting a stopped semi-truck. One clearly retrieving a dropped object from the ground, triggered his training. The patrol car's lights activated as the officer used his vehicle's PA system to order the men to step away from the truck with their hands visible. Instead, they made a dash for their sedan. The officer managed to block their vehicle's exit from the overlook just as the first of several responding units arrived from the opposite direction. The subsequent investigation revealed a disturbing pattern that sent shockwaves through the commercial trucking industry. The two men, identified as brothers Liam and Connor Markham, were connected to at least 7 other incidents across Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, where commercial trucks had experienced mysterious mechanical failures in remote locations. In 2 of those cases, the drivers had disappeared entirely. Their vehicles were found abandoned. A search of the Markhams' property uncovered driver's licenses belonging to the missing truckers, along with cargo manifests and shipping schedules for dozens of high-value deliveries. Most disturbing were the detailed maps of remote sections of mountain highways, with specific curves and pullouts marked for what investigators believed were planned ambush points. For Nathan Reed, the most chilling revelation came during the Markhams' eventual trial. Forensic analysis of GPS data from their vehicle showed they had followed his truck from the supply depot that morning. They had specifically targeted him and his cargo. Had they succeeded with their sabotage, his truck would have lost power and braking capability while navigating one of the deadliest sections of the pass. The catastrophic potential extended beyond Reed himself. A runaway semi on Independence, passed during the increasing tourist traffic of mid-morning, could have resulted in multiple collisions and countless casualties as the out-of-control truck careened down the mountainside. The case prompted a federal investigation into cargo theft and trafficking operations throughout the Mountain West. Subsequent arrests connected the Markham brothers to a sophisticated network that had been operating undetected for nearly 3 years, specifically targeting trucks carrying high-value industrial equipment for quick resale through international black market channels. For the trucking industry, the Independence Pass incident became a watershed moment. Companies implemented new security protocols, including real-time tracking, emergency alert systems, and regular mechanical inspections at secure facilities rather than roadside. Many carriers began using escort vehicles for high-value shipments through remote areas, and dashcams, once optional, became standard issue. Nathan Reed received commendations from both state law enforcement and the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. His quick thinking and calm response under threat were credited with not only saving his own life, but potentially those of dozens of unsuspecting tourists who would have been on the pass later that morning. Reed still drives the mountain routes of Colorado, though he now leads training sessions for other drivers on security awareness and emergency response. When asked about that June morning on Independence Pass, his response reflects the vigilance that has become second nature to drivers throughout the region. The mountains will always have natural dangers, he said. Steep grades, narrow roads, rock slides, those you can prepare for. It's the dangers you don't expect, the ones that look ordinary until suddenly they're not, that you really have to watch for. Sometimes the most important skill isn't how you handle the truck. It's noticing what doesn't quite fit in the world around you. For truckers traversing the remote highways of the American West, Reed's experience has become a cautionary tale taught in training programs throughout the industry. The lesson is clear. In the isolated stretches where cell service disappears and help is hours away, survival sometimes depends on spotting the small inconsistencies that signal danger. The unmarked service vehicle, the 2 helpful strangers, the mechanical failure that occurs at precisely the worst possible location. Today, a small unofficial memorial stands at the overlook where Reed's quick thinking averted disaster. Fellow truckers who know the story often stop briefly, leaving a coin or small token on a weathered rock carving. It serves as a silent reminder that on America's most beautiful and treacherous roads, the difference between a routine drive and a deadly encounter can hinge on a single crucial moment of awareness.